Community Radio.
Hello. Mic check. Hello, everyone. We're about to start. If you can't see, you feel free to stand by the stairs or go upstairs. Make yourself at home. Are we good? How are you?
I'm good. Is everyone all right in here? What's happening? This is like a very unique situation. Yeah, I'm mad happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll let you take it away.
Okay, welcome everyone. This is Deep Feedback. It's going to be an evening of dialogue, conversation, performances, and a lot of back-to-back. This whole idea is about, deep feedback, being able to deeply engage in something, and that often comes in the form of collaboration, conversation, and just learning from each other. So I'd like to, first of all, thank the Metropolitan Museum of Manila for sharing space. This is such a unique circumstance to be in, to have everyone here under this beautiful museum, and to have really great performances later. Thanks to the crew at Manila Community Radio for bringing this together. Estes, Good Morning Wines, and Type A. Welcome everyone. My name is Sai Versailles. I am a journalist, I'm a DJ, I'm also a volunteer archivist at MCR. And today we are going to be discussing, Elijah and I are going to be discussing this idea of deep feedback. If I could briefly introduce Elijah, he's an artist, lecturer, has been in independent music and arts in London for 15 years. In 2010, he co-founded the record label Butterz, which helped pioneer grime and electronic and dance music. And in 2021, I believe it was, you started the Yellow Squares Project, and it was really his outlet to explore ideas of cultural production and creativity. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the intro as well. I'll just give you a brief introduction of myself. Hopefully everyone can see the screen. If you haven't seen my Instagram yet, it's ELI1AH. And as I said, I've been publishing these ideas about cultural production, sustainability, kind of creativity in general, from my experiences working as an artist manager, as a DJ in electronic music in London. And I've been doing this project for 2.5 years. Originally just kind of started out as post-it style notes, and then I've kind of tried to break it out of that into real life events like this, big conversations, art and billboards and all this other stuff. So my kind of music history is in a scene called grime, which is a combination of British rap, dancehall, techno, garage, all of these things kind of combined. And yeah, I was a DJ in that scene. I mean, I am a DJ in that scene. I always say am. These are all additional layers, and I'll share some more stuff. So this is what my feed looks like, if you've seen it on Instagram. And yeah, the yellow squares are just what we're going to kind of cover today. So ideas, art, we're in a museum, gallery, art museum today. Journalism, this is my form of music journalism, and the idea of a label or a collective or a community, and then the kind of deep feedback loop of these ideas. So trying to break out of all of these kind of binaries of, say, what a journalist is, or what a DJ is, or what a writer is, and we're going to kind of go back and forth. I want to do one more slide. So this is how it started. That's how it started, how it's going. Saya said, come to Manila last January. And I said I could do it at the end of the year when I'm back this way. Drop me an email, and here I am today. So it took a while, but we got there. This is mad grateful to be here.
This is literally how it how it's going, how it went, like literally, like side by side. It's amazing.
Yeah, this is like a lot of opportunities and a lot of great things have just come out from people asking the question. And today we're going to spend a lot of time on questions and sharing ideas so everyone can hear each other's voice. But I just really want to like highlight this. It's from people asking and not being afraid to ask a question. So the fact that you asked and we found a way to make it happen through like the support of the venue, support that I got from back home, people like Big Up WeTransfer and other kind of people that have helped. Yeah, it takes a few things to get here, but just the fact that you asked is like a big step in making something like this happen. Right. I'm going to use these two words to start off the conversation. So back to back, we usually use this terminology in DJ culture where two DJs will just share the decks together, play maybe 1 or 2 tunes each or 3 or 4 tunes each and play together. And lecture is usually used in academic terms of talking about ideas. And I thought about combining the two terminologies from my DJ work and from sharing ideas and lecturing work. So it's like a back-to-back lecture. Ideas from Sai, ideas from me, ideas from you, and then we kind of share it together. So this is the second one I've done like this, and I kind of enjoy these more because it's like a more conversational way of working. I've only just got to Manila, so I'm here to learn as much as share. And yeah, so excuse me in moments where I don't know something. This is going to be common, right?
It's a safe space for dialogue. Like, you're allowed to make mistakes as much as we are. We're not authorities in anything, so we're allowed to change our minds as much as you are. So this is the space for that.
And this idea, so deep feedback came from the idea of being like post follows on Instagram or post follows on TikTok. Like, it doesn't really matter how many follows you got after a certain point. Doesn't matter how many likes you got. The fire emoji is like, what's the point? Like, you know, one of the posts I made around this was, do you want a fire emoji or do you want tears in the club? And feed something after putting out work online or releasing songs or doing radio shows or putting up art. The highest compliment is just seeing another human engage with it or having another conversation. So this is like a real life bit of deep feedback in itself. Everyone's staring at us. We brought all like 100 people together here in Manila. This is very special. So this is like the embodiment of what I think deep feedback is. And all of my work is like a us and them, or me and you, or us two, you know what I'm saying?
And it's amazing how like 3 words can start that conversation of just a continuous deep feedback. Literally, I said, come to Manila. And now we're here. And I think it prevents a lot of people to ask for help or to start that conversation because maybe you don't know what to say, or maybe it's so silly. And social media as well lends itself to very condensed version of like what you want to say. So maybe there is this idea that like whatever you put out there is actually just going to be very frivolous. But we can't undermine like how social media is such a big part of our lives and how effective it is and how impactful it is, and it can be used positively. So I'm just really happy that this has happened and that we get to share space with all of you and talk about these things, because otherwise, like, what's going to happen if we don't participate or try?
For sure.
Yeah.
And like, you know, when we think of like commenting on someone's work, it feels like really obvious to say, but if you like something, actually say you like it and maybe why as well. Like, even if someone doesn't respond, I think it's a good process for you to get out and understand why you even like something, why you feel something. Or like, if you leave a comment on YouTube, it's there forever and it kind of becomes part of the canon of that work too. And you being able to give an additional context, like say like one of the songs that get played tonight, you'd be like, oh, the first time I heard this tune was in the museum, you know? And that being like a memory of that thing, and that is a kind of deep feedback too.
And I often think about like things that I see on social media as well, and how that bleeds into conversations in real life. Like I tell someone like, hey, like, did you see this thing? It could be like a really, like an elaborate way that someone made a video, or an effort by someone to condense information in a way that's like very accessible, that it reaches the right person at the right time, and then you talk to your friends like, hey, do you see this thing? And then it becomes this whole conversation, and you think about it afterwards when you guys have parted ways, and that just goes to show how, like, when you want to create something and you feel like it's frivolous, or you feel like I shouldn't be doing this, like, even the effort, it's the effort, right? It's like if you put effort into something, it'll find the right places to go to and spark a conversation, even if it's just one person. Like, imagine if we didn't have social media and you said something to someone and someone overheard it in a cafe and they talk about it for days. Even if you don't know it, like, that's how things move, and how that moves people, and that's really, like, we can't undermine that.
Straight up.
Yeah.
I think, making sure that we don't lose sight of like these like when numbers get bigger on the internet, like actually the smaller numbers actually start to matter more. So as my following has gone on Instagram, I've had to like really deeply engage with things more in real life, because once you get to a certain scale, the resonance starts to go down, if doesn't make sense. Like, there's a lot of people that say like interact on the page that I would never share space with in real life or interact with in real life, you know?
I feel like also when you first introduced this term to me, it was around the time you were trying to incorporate a more optimistic approach to yellow squares. Could you talk more about that, and like where this sort of optimism comes from for you and what it means?
Yeah, so I guess we're all here interested in art, and I think that's an optimistic position in general, regardless of our circumstances, regardless of where we come from. To be interested and making art, I think, is a very optimistic point of view. Like, you think the world could be better with your ideas in it, and people just don't even have that as an opinion. But a lot of what I've tried to do is disarm art creation and putting out ideas from industry and expectation and success and numbers. So it's just like creating without all of that other stuff. And I feel like since I've been doing that, I've been like building confidence and progressing as an artist in myself without this number idea. And I don't know, like, optimism in this like crazy world we live in is like a radical position, right? It's like most people don't like think. I think we all think like that underlying, but it's not the first thing that comes into your head. In England, people will just say everything is all right. That's all right.
Keep calm, carry on.
Huh? Keep calm. Yeah, keep calm. Just like this attitude of ambivalence. Like, it doesn't matter. I don't care. And yeah, someone's saying, "Oh no, you should try that," or "Why not?" I don't know. These are still optimistic positions, and needing to kind of push back against like doomerism, even just to get work done myself, has been really helpful.
That's true.
All right. I'm going to ask you a question. Your platform is called Cultural Learnings. What does this mean?
Cultural learning started actually when I was in university, and I was really deep in my thesis writing, and I just wanted to deactivate social media. And I told all my friends on Facebook, like, hey, like, if you want to keep in touch, sign up to my newsletter, and I called it Cultural Learnings. And how I used Facebook at the time was like, I was really engaged in these like Facebook groups about like films, about random interests, and I would just like, that was what Facebook was for me. It was an outlet for me to like share things that I found on the internet, to find things in the internet. And when that was gone, I still wanted to continue that, so I started a newsletter. And it really just became like an elaborate recommendation list of things that I've read, what I'm thinking, what I'm watching, what I'm reading. And it sort of evolved as my writing evolved with me. And I think I wrote a lot of it in the pandemic and me responding to what was happening. I was reading a lot, I was consuming a lot of media and trying to create an outlet for my journalism when I couldn't be out in the field. And then there came a point when some personal stuff was happening in my life and then I basically couldn't write anymore. And I stopped that for a bit and it transposed into a radio show. And it was around the time as well when I started DJing, and it became an outlet for me to then explore music and to practice my DJing. I invited people to like make mixes, and I have this very like referential approach to my DJing, I think, wherein I'm influenced by a lot of genres, and I will adapt based on the context rather than trying to push a certain sound. So like a lot of my shows are themed like, I'm exploring like film soundtracks, or it's a Daft Punk retrospective, or like a Breaking Bad soundtrack show, or like a Valentine's thing. And then it was like an extension of my journalism that I couldn't express in my writing. And then when I started DJing a lot, then I got kind of sick of it and I had to like step back from culture learnings and try to like reevaluate like, what is this becoming? And now how I imagine it, it's sort of like an archival project of like where I was at a given time. Because I'm also grappling with this idea of journalism and what it means to be objective and factual and impartial when I have a really hard time as a journalist, especially now, to be impartial because I feel very strongly about things and I actually situate myself in places where I have to respond to something. How do I grapple with that as a journalist when there's a lot of misinformation and there needs to be checks and balances, but how do I account for myself in this story? And so that's sort of what I'm trying to grapple with now in cultural learnings, is like, how do we learn about culture in context? And yeah, that's what it is.
And like culture is like a strong word. I feel like I had one of the squares said culture was the word of the 10s and then community is the word of the 20s. So that's how we were using it back in the UK. We used to say this is part of the culture, or this is for the culture, and we'd use it in this kind of like, really like a verb. Like, this is culture. Culture is happening, and in that way. Are you using it in a similar way?
Is culture a verb? Is that what you're saying?
Or maybe, I think that's how we use it in the UK. Like, it feels like culture is like an activity. Like, this right now is the culture, or this is culture right now.
That's an interesting question. Culture for me is like, this is making my head boggle right now. Like, I encounter this word every day in my life and I always try to advocate for it, but to like,
Or all right, let me throw it a different way.
Okay, let's go.
What would you define as like community? Because like, use them, sometimes I feel like we're using them interchangeably. So do you think you could be called like community learnings, or does it have to be cultural learnings?
I feel like cultural learnings to me, and like how I identify with culture, is just the different ways that people understand each other and how that evolves, because I don't think culture is static. And when we observe subcultures, we understand them from a point in time. And that sort of like gives a snapshot of what people are feeling. And it's like, the zeitgeist is another word that I love, because being able to capture something at a point in time doesn't mean that it's fluid in that way. And when I think about community and culture, communities change as well. Like, the people within communities change and the ideas around it. And yeah, I think that's where I stand.
Okay, sweet. Manila. So this is my first time here. I've only been here for, I guess, a day and a half. If you're gonna give an introduction to, like, or a summary of like who we've gathered here, could you like give us a bit of an insight into MCR, what's been happening over the last couple of years, and then like, yeah, why here in particular?
Well, Manila is an interesting place. I grew up here. I also left to live in London for a bit. And I guess like Manila as a city is it's very gritty and it's very abrasive and it's very also very eclectic in a way that's like an overload on the senses. And I think that manifests itself in culture in many ways. And Manila, MCR was really like a response to, it was established in 2020 and during the pandemic. And it was really a response to like the closure of venues because of the pandemic. And that meant that a lot of culture, a lot of communities didn't have a space for them to perform or to express themselves. And what is it? Yeah, I guess like it became like it allowed a lot of collectives to come together and to share resources and to be able to be an archive in a way for artists to self-publish and to express themselves and to also just really democratize the resources that are available, because especially in DJing and in music, you require a lot of like equipment that is very gate-kept in clubs, and when there aren't already enough venues, and the competition for space makes it really difficult to enter as a creative person, especially if you're young and you don't have a lot of resources or networks or experience. And I really love that about the team, is there's this ethos of like trying to make it accessible for everyone and to break this illusion that, especially in DJing and in music and in dance music, that there's so many gates that need to be, hoops that need to be jumped over. And yeah, that's what, for me, what MCR is. And I joined in 2022. I started as a broadcaster and joined the team later on. And it's been an interesting experience, like the contrast from coming to London, where everything is available, and there are so many resources, and having to adapt to a city that has very different priorities culturally was a challenge. But somehow having to make it work as part of the creative process and doing it within your means has been a fulfilling challenge to, sort of take up on. And yeah.
Okay, sweet. And I'll speak about London. So from East London, the music scene that I participate in is also kind of based there, grime, and it's got a long history of pirate radio and then online radio. So stations like Rinse FM and NTS kind of started in the corner of London that I come from. And a lot of the kind of models of electronic music are influenced by what happens there in London. So things like maybe like MCR and Soul Community Radio and The Lot Radio, all these things may be influenced in some way from the place that I'm from. Today, it won't be too different to here, that people are struggling with the cost of living, venues shutting down, and maybe smaller kind of access to space. Similar challenge, different resources set. But what maybe Londoners and people from the UK don't realize is how good the infrastructure actually is to do art. And part of this, the reason why we're doing this conversation here and we'll broadcast back to the UK, is so we can share the experience of what it's like in Manila to set an example. So in the UK, for example, like our government funds the arts at quite a high level. So artists can apply to the government and get like a grant. So they might get like a grant for like £1,000, for example, to release music. And this influences what the ability, like who gets to participate, who gets to have a voice. The music industry there is very developed, huge. There's huge infrastructure around it. People that maybe make a couple of songs or rap songs or dance songs are able to get record deals, management, touring ability, and all of this kind of stuff. And again, that fuels a whole ecosystem that is maybe not as developed here. And my peer group, who will hopefully hear this one day in the future in London, if they have opportunities to come here, and to come to places like Manila, it's like you have to come with an attitude of giving, not taking, because the economy is not the same, our resources are not the same, and we need to like spread the wealth, because our government won't, and our industry, you know, the bigger parts of our industry won't either. So it's down to the artists to kind of have that principle. Does that make sense?
Yes. I'd also like to add about Manila.
Yeah.
I guess just like my understanding of dance music and putting myself in context. Like I sort of grew up with Manila when trance was sort of becoming popular in the 2000s, and then going to London and being exposed to that scene, and then coming back and seeing that like the scenes had fragmented. And I feel like in Manila was always trying to, I guess we never really had like our dance culture was always in reference to the West, because, and I always struggled with that idea. It's like, why don't we have our own thing? And part of that was like ignorance of what was indigenous to us and what was available from like a Filipino lens. But actually, like, yeah, it's always like, we for the Philippines doesn't have a sort of native club culture. That's the most crude way of saying it, because we didn't have the sort of institutions that back clubs or that funded clubs or the spaces, the warehouses that were in the West. And I always sort of like growing up, I had this sort of question of like, why isn't it like this here? Well, the conditions are just it's not that it's conducive for it, but it's not native to it. It's not it's not hyper localized in that way. So for the longest time, I've just tried to like dismantle this idea of like, why can't we have raves in the same way that like we have it in Berlin or in Japan or in all these developed countries? It's because, you know, like think about where the working class are dancing. They're dancing in like public spaces, not in a club, and their musical references are also so different. Like we're very like we are a really singing country, and we love to sing, and that will inform the music that is natural to Filipinos and to the space and to the city. So that's something about Manila that I feel like is very understated. It is that it's its own thing, and I think a lot of the talent here is really just trying to figure out what that means, and it's something that we can talk about later.
Okay, sweet. So Sai has written some of these squares to me as well, so I gave her my iPad, and she's done her own yellow squares. So this was a question to me, right?
Yes.
Do you want to expand on the question just for context?
Yeah, so when are you going to realize you are an artist? I have been thinking about this a lot the past few days, because the idea that like art is for everyone, actually the Metropolitan Museum, their motto is art for all, which of course I agree with and is a virtue that we should follow. But I don't think that the impulse to call ourselves artists is in all of us, including myself. Actually, because I say that I'm a journalist, a lot of the ways that I navigate the cultural sector is that of an artist. Because I'm very precarious, I do things independently, I have my strong point of view, and I actually don't agree with a lot of like the dogmas that are inherent in journalism, and I'm trying to like change that for myself in a different ways that I imagine that to happen. But I still hesitate to call myself an artist, and that just speaks to where I am in my life right now. And yeah, so how I wanted to ask this question to you is that your talk in 2022, Close the App, Make the Thing, right? With III. At the time, you were calling yourself a DJ, writer, curator, artist manager, but when it came to you as an artist, you hesitated for a bit. But in the days that we've been speaking, since you've been in Manila, you've been more confident in calling yourself an artist. So where was that source of doubt rooted from at the time, and when did you start feeling confident about it?
Yeah, I spent like the first, I guess, most of the time that I've been working in music, working on other people's projects and helping other people get their ideas out in the world. And that was like my main priority. I think I had like an artistic vision, but it was always filtered with other people's and collaborations and all this kind of stuff. This is the first project I've really done by myself. Obviously, I collaborate with other people, but it's mainly just me. 90% of the work in it is just me. So maybe now that I've done something by myself that's connected, I can be like, oh, actually, this is my own art form. This is like an artist's work. Whereas before with Butterz, it's a collaboration with many artists, the label, ravers, and all this kind of stuff. But with this, yeah, this is like the first me project, and maybe being able to kind of explore it from like a really simple idea to like the bigger ideas, like the visual installations and the album, has like built confidence, which sounds really stupid because I've been doing stuff for so long. But building your own confidence in your own work is like a whole other process. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. We kind of briefly mentioned this as well, like funding. This event, like how I got here, was from support from an organization in Amsterdam. They're based in Amsterdam. We transfer, and that's what made it possible. And obviously, if we just, I don't know, put up tickets, the tickets would have had to be like $100 or something to make it work. So it is kind of like the benefit that I have like relationships already that can help me get to some places, but it doesn't work the other way around. So like, if you try to reach out to like an organization, you might not get the same kind of
No, it's difficult.
response.
It's like there's this perception, or not a perception, but there's this idea that coming from like a colonized country, or just the colonized condition, that I need to prove myself. And there's so many hoops that I have to go through to do that. And the anxiety that comes with the process of getting there, the whole thing is like so uncertain, because in that process, in each step, like whatever opportunity that is can be taken away from you. And I actually just want to share my experience.
Sure.
When my partner and I, Sean, we went to Berlin to do a project there, and we had received funding from the Goethe Institute, and it was a really exciting thing, because like in the Philippines, there just aren't a lot of sources of funding to pursue your projects, and let alone for the subject that we were doing, which is exploring this idea of privilege, and how our understanding of privilege is, and how privilege informs our understanding of vernacular music, and using Butterz, which is the grassroots genre of dance music in the Philippines. Like, when is Butterz ever going to be funded? And so to like have this opportunity was amazing. But then there was a strike in Germany that called for a boycott of cultural institutions and state cultural funding, which meant that the strike was encouraging international artists to withdraw their labor and to not participate in these institutions because of an anti-discrimination clause that was being pushed in Germany, that was prejudice against people who were vocal about Palestinians. And of course we wanted to support this cause, but then it put us in such a difficult position, because it meant that we had to compromise our own cultural work. And where it was a whole week of like trying to grapple, what's going to happen to this project if we don't pursue it? What's going to happen to all the funding that we raise independently ourselves, that we're going to have to carry the burden of and possibly get into debt for? And while the idea of trying to stand up for something is right, is something that we should all do, the compromises that has to come with like your values, well, especially with us, was so difficult to navigate. Like, you want to stand up for something, but at the expense of your own livelihood, then what becomes of the things that we believe in? And in the case of this cultural project, we sort of came to the conclusion that we needed to participate. Like, our work in this was not part of the atrocities that were happening in Palestine. You know, like, ultimately we had something to say as well about this issue. And how we rationalized it is like, you need to have a bottom line. Like, we needed to know why we were in this for, and not to have that conflated with issues that you don't have control over. Because we sort of like need to be realistic as well. And Yeah, so when it comes to like having to prove yourself as a cultural worker and it being so difficult, that's the sort of like uncertainty that I learned in the hard way. And ultimately it was like a blessing in disguise because like that experience of going through it showed me how privileged I am as well to be able to have the option to choose like to go or not. And there are so many people that don't have that privilege as well. So
Straight up. And like, this is not for you guys in the room, but the people watching, like maybe in the West, the brands, the companies, it's like the consequence of your funding in these places can go a lot further and make a greater impact rather than say like just focusing on things in London or in Berlin or New York. I noticed the difference from my travels over the last year, how much, like say $1,000 US makes a big difference in places like this, and this is not obvious to them. Culture is happening here, it hasn't been historically amplified there, but they can be making such a big difference in places where people are using their product, people are relating to what they do, but they don't think about contributing here, you know? And part of this project is like trying to amplify voices like yours and communities like this, so it's like more of a viable decision, or they just know who you are, you know?
yeah, I actually just also want to add about just the idea of cultural funding and give context as well to my experience and what happened in Berlin. I was doing some research and like just the stark difference in value for culture was made apparent to me when I tried to compare the cultural funding that was being put in Berlin as a city alone versus the Philippines. So then these are the numbers, and I hope you can catch up with me, is that Berlin, their cultural budget was, this year is set at 947 million euros, which is 57.6 billion pesos. And the Philippines, if we just count the National Commission of Culture and the Arts, which is the NCCA, it's basically the Ministry of Culture, their budget this year is 37.57 million, which is 600,000 euros. 600,000 euros versus 947 million euros. Like a billion versus a million, that's crazy. And I tried to calculate that per capita. Berlin has a population of 3.6 million. That's a city. And the Philippines, with this budget from the NCCA, a country of 115.5 million, the Philippines per capita has a cultural budget of 30 centavos, or 0.005 euros. Whereas with Berlin's cultural budget, they get like 16,000 pesos per capita, or 263 euros. And that's just the NCCA, which is like the Ministry of Culture, the ones that are pushing for policy. There's also different cultural agencies like the National Library, the National Historical Commission, the National Archives, the Cultural Center, and the Commission of Filipino Language. Together, they make up 1.5 billion of the national budget, which is 24.6 million euros, and that means 13 pesos per capita still. And I think that was just so stark. I mean, I do think probably the Department of Agriculture has more money because food and food security is such a priority. And, you know, and people are working so hard, they sometimes don't have time for culture. But what does that mean then for communities and for bringing people together and for morale and for our sense of identity? Because those are important things too, and I find that really hard to grapple.
Thank you. So you tweeted that, and I was like, it's important that you put it in a lecture, and that you know, my privilege has been able to share that data with partners back in the UK and people that reach out to me too, because again, this is not obvious to people in the West or brands or companies and stuff. So I will continue to share that data because I think it's super important. And you know, like that difference between a million and a billion is not obvious to everyone as well. And when you put it down to per head, being, was that 263 euros to 0.0
is 0.005 euros or 30 cent octavos, which
Yeah.
is barely enough to make anything. And the 13 pesos per capita, that's not even enough to like buy like instant noodles, you know, or
Yeah.
a cup of noodles, which is
Okay.
crazy.
We'll keep going. Yeah, this was your question.
Yeah, so how do we improve discourse when context is constantly obscured? I was responding to this because I guess like this idea of deep feedback requires a lot of effort and a lot of discourse and a lot of communication. But I think the way that I guess information flows and the context that is lost as a result. I grapple with this as a journalist because there's this idea of like being impartial or being objective, and I think the report, for example, the criticisms about the reporting on like the Israel-Palestine conflict doesn't put enough context to certain stories, and people are really frustrated with that. And that's a valid issue, I think, because people are trying to, well, you're trying to find information that's factual, but at the same time, you're losing the sort of element of like how that story is being produced. And I see this in music as well, where a lot of, I guess, profiles or articles are coming out of like press releases that are often like copy pasted. And where's the context there? Like what happens to the stories beyond just the press release? And I struggle with this as well when I'm pitching stories to editors coming from the Philippines, and they're sort of asking me like, why is this story interesting? Like, can you give more? When actually whatever that story is it culturally, whatever I'm talking about culturally has trickled down so late here that it's old news in like a lot of Western countries. And they're asking like why it's interesting, why it's important. And I'm like, actually, this is important for us. And the assumption that, the context is just lost basically. And instead of assuming like, oh, like we're not reporting this enough, maybe we should report it. There's the idea that like, oh, how about make it more interesting or make it more relevant? Like relevant to who? Relative to what context?
Exactly. I guess this is what I've been trying to do with this work in general is I'm not alone. I came from a music scene. I come from a place. My parents are Jamaican, like come from this lineage of like sound system culture and all of these things. And as much as it might irritate me to repeat parts of that, it needs to be repeated so people understand our story and why we do certain things the way we do. Otherwise, it does get lost. As I post some of these squares on Instagram, I'll try and use all the slots in the carousel and add as much context for each post as possible. Otherwise, yeah, things do get lost. And I guess one thing I've experienced in doing this, especially as the work has got wider, is it's not obvious why you say certain things. Like the more I'm repeating, I'm like, oh yeah, why do I say that? And it makes me actually question my point of view too. And like like you said, the dogmas of certain scenes or certain politics of a community. You're like, hold on, we've just been saying this is the way it is for 10 years without realizing that we can first have the agency to change it, or when we're presenting our work in front of other people, they won't understand why that is. And the more we talk about it and the more we make it clear what we're doing, then relevance comes with that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Seeing this question now, I realize why I had such a hard time like talking about like what culture is when you ask me, because like depending on like things move so quickly, like especially in music and in dance music here, the dynamics change so fast and context changes so quickly, and that's culture. Like the sort of zeitgeist shifts at a given point in time, and it's very difficult to capture. And it's also like a very difficult job for journalists and reporters to have to like stick to that point of truth and to say that as fact. And I resonate a lot with this question, and in terms of how I define culture, because culture is context for
Straight
me.
up.
Like for one person's culture will be very different in a different context. So like with dance music in the Philippines, it's very different than it is in the UK, in Berlin, but sometimes we're listening to the same music. So yeah, there's a je ne sais quoi about it, I don't know.
All right,
Yeah.
we'll come back to that in the questions. So this is one of the squares that I posted that got a kind of big response. I think this is the most liked post I've actually done. So it's, if you love music, you should learn how to DJ. And I guess this is a historically kind of gate-kept part of the arts and electronic music, like the DJ is king or queen or god or whatever it is. And I'm thinking of it in the opposite way. If you love music, you should learn how to DJ. To me, means the best way to enjoy electronic music is to participate in it, to mix it, to play around with it, to buy it, to share it, to kind of really have a tangible relationship with the music that you play, rather than like a passive one. And as you can see from, if you can see some of the comments, a lot of people disagree with this point of view. And I think it's another thing that's good in a scene, in a community, a bunch of people here, is that we have like space for disagreement or different points of view, and we live together with that. And as we've, everyone's going in different ways, politically, spiritually, whatever it's going to be, we still have ideas that we can sit together with, laugh at, point out, think this is stupid, but also be respectful of them. So this is a tricky one, and it's something I do believe. I'm not just saying it just to rattle people, but opening up who gets to DJ, who gets to write, who gets to be a journalist, who gets to be an artist, who gets to be a curator, makes all of this stuff more interesting.
When you say that, you also have another yellow square where we don't have enough DJs. What is a DJ to you?
Okay, so a DJ to me, at its core, is someone that collects, curates music for themselves. That's level one. Level two is mixing, and then like level three is that process, but then sharing it for others. A lot of people think of the DJ as the person that is going to be here today, playing music and performing for other people. But I think that's, 4 or 5 steps down. The first 3 things, I think we all share in common. We all love music here. We all probably collect it in some form or fashion, whether that's saving things to a playlist or YouTube or buying records or CDs, whatever it is, and then making sense of it for yourself. We all probably do that in some form or fashion, but you just don't call it DJing. And I want to detach DJing from the DJ, if that makes sense. The DJ is the person that will perform here today, but DJing is something that we can all do. Does that make sense?
Yes. And to add to that, when people ask me like, how long have you been DJing? I tell them like, I started DJing when I was like 11 technically, because I would like collect playlists on Spotify, and I had loads. Like there was a time on Spotify when you can like upload your playlist into iTunes and just like have it connected somehow. And up to this day, like I'm still drawing from those playlists and like creating sets out of it today, like more than 10 years later. And like you said as well in your previous yellow squares, is if DJing is an art, and if there's an art to DJing, it can be whatever you want it to be.
Exactly.
And also as a journalist, I feel like DJing is such an interesting medium because DJing adds context to the music and actually recontextualizes it in a lot of ways, where you'll play it in a setting that isn't where it isn't usually heard, or pairing music where that doesn't usually go together, and being able to add nuance to that or add a sort of historical idea to it through discussion. Like if pairing discussion with music is just so it's sort of like food, where you can never trace, and actually a lot of cultures where you can't really trace where the beginning was, and it flows to each other, like how a lot of techno had actually been rooted in like hip hop, and how in hip hop there had been an evolution in technologies that allowed the producers to make that type of music, and the sort of the interconnected ways that culture evolves because of context.
Straight up. We kind of both have alluded to this. So I wrote this a couple of weeks ago when Pitchfork which is like a kind of music publication website, and a few other places, Complex. There's been a few kind of shutdowns recently. But I said journalists are like artists now. 99% do it unpaid to explore their interests, 1% get paid, and a fraction of the 1% earn a living. And I don't think this is a bad thing. It's like artists and journalists being on the same kind of level. Before, maybe if you're a journalist, and you work for a publication, you just get to review any artist. You could say their music is trash with no consequence. You didn't have to like compete in the same arena. But today, you have to like find mechanisms to platform yourself in the same way. And it's super interesting now. I see like journalists kind of complaining about this in the same way that artists do. Artists say, oh, like it's really hard to put out music or get someone to listen to my songs or listen to my album or review it. And the journalists are saying it's hard to get someone to read my work. It's hard to get someone to publish my work. And in both circumstances, like you're doing like you did with the newsletter, it's like self-publishing first, the same way we self-release and release our own music. It's the same thing. And I've seen more journalists take on roles like production, management, artists behind the scenes, and then they still maintain a kind of journalistic point of view or practice within their work. So for most people, it's going to remain like a strand of what they do rather than what they do whole.
Yeah. And I love using journalism as like an example of like a profession that could use a bit of recontextualizing, because journalism is like a very professionalized industry where there are certain institutions that uphold the certain standards, and for good reason, because you do need those checks and balances to fact-checking and ensuring impartiality and objectivity and all these things. But there are problems with that, real problems. And with journaling as a word, or if you break it down, it's really like to just write down your day-to-day. And there's so much that could be extrapolated from that. And I think that applies to all forms of creativity. Like, I think it's very easy in visual arts or in music or the traditionally, culturally creative forms of work to be able to extrapolate things. But I do think there's a lot of room as well in whatever you're doing, whether that's like the art of living or the art of budgeting or the art of like organizing your plates at home or the art of making sure that you walk your dog on time and like making sure that you have like a schedule and the art of sustaining your energy. Like there's so many ways to do the thing in different ways. And I think that's why everyone can be an artist, because the art is just doing the thing and in many different ways, using many different things. We're all artists here.
Straight up. This is your question.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer to this. This is a very hard question.
Yeah, actually I was responding to a yellow square that you wrote, which is, are you sure you want to rely on your art to make a living? And actually you can add more context because I know that there were other yellow squares before that.
Yeah.
So are you sure you want to rely on your art to make a living? And I had this idea that and I experienced this in my own practice because, it's very hard to stand up for your values and to do the things that you want to do in your own way and to sustain yourself, because sometimes those ideas are just not bankable. Like the institutions, it's not going to make money, and like a lot of people put precedence on money. But at the same time, there's this idea that like art is a positive force in everyone's lives. But when do we draw the line of like when we shouldn't do it because of the realities that we face of like sustaining ourselves, of making things work? What do you think?
Yeah, I guess I originally wrote about like the artist and making art to make money or to make a living from it, because I was seeing a lot of people what I feel that play the kind of game on hard mode. Yeah, you're trying to make a living, you're trying to make art, you're trying to say like if you're releasing songs, the amount of streams you would need to have to like make a living would be like 20 million a year or something. This is like very hard to do. And then you do it with niche music, you do it with like, I don't know, like 8-minute long songs and things that are not gonna kind of quote unquote be viral. Like there's so many layers to why that's so difficult. And you're competing with corporations that are trying to do the same thing as you. So again, I'm trying to disarm art making from making a living so we all make things that are different to what the corporations are pursuing. The corporations releasing art are like kind of maybe thinking about this as an extraction. Like we're gonna try and get the most streams, the most thing, because that's the only way it works. But like you're saying about experience in life as an artist and thinking about creating art in different ways, well, it's probably like easier to put art around your living in that way instead, rather than trying to say, I don't know, be a full-time DJ. I think you can be a better DJ as not a full-time DJ than as a full-time DJ, because all the compromises that you have to make and all of the other things that you would probably make you miserable doing. But this is a point of view that a lot of people disagree with. They think you need to be committed at 100% to make your art worthwhile, and I think that's BS.
Same.
Yeah.
I think I have an answer to this that I just thought of actually.
Okay.
I think the circumstances in which you shouldn't do your art is if you need rest. And that also addresses this idea that like we should be doing art. Because I think if you need to step back and to live a little, to like not, because it's, especially in our culture now, to sustain an artistic practice and to match that with, I mean, it depends what kind of artist you are, right? There are some people that like just do it in their own privacy, and I think that's a very sustainable way to do it. But I know, like, there's this aspirational quality to creative work that is both, I feel like, a farce, because it makes people believe that it's either easy or easily attainable, but there's also like a motivational, inspirational quality to this aspiration. And I think like just being able to, and this is, I guess, like, I don't know if it's a boring answer, or I'm sure there are many answers to this.
100%.
But I think like if anyone here is feeling burnout from creating their art, just like step back.
Sure.
And yeah, you'll be able to enjoy it again.
Should we do some questions? We got time for questions, sir? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, sweet. We'll do some questions. Remember, I'm just here for like 1 or 2 days or something. So let's try and do like loads of questions, quick fire, as many as possible, and bang out. Who wants to go first?
Any
with
questions?
a question?
Someone.
You've got to go. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, you got to do one. The reason why I'm pointing you out is because you were in the rave with me 10 years ago in London. So give a bit of context to what that's like.
To be in your rave?
Hey, if you like.
I was in the Butterz rave.
Yeah.
With JME.
Yeah.
And it was ridiculous. Where's Skillam?
Yeah, he's home. He's home. But we're still partners, yeah.
I've been trying to rack my brain for a question. I can't.
You don't have a question. All right. That's all good.
What's next for you?
What's next? Okay, so this project has been going for a couple of years, and this year is the last year of the project. So I'm going to finish it in December. I think you create something very different with the intention of ending it. Most things just stop for some reason out of your control. Most things maybe just fizzle out. But I have a destination of December being the wrap up of this project. 3 years of work, over like 1,000 yellow squares. Got to every place that wanted me to come, and then start again with a blank slate. So yeah, ending as part of the creative process. Thank you. Who wants to go next? Yeah, go for it. Hey.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'd like to ask, because I've been seeing these two people in the admired music savant types. There is Rick Rubin and Jacob Collier.
I watched this clip just now.
Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
So where should an artist place their audience and their peers in the way that they're doing art, they're making art, because both of them disagree that Rick Rubin says the audience should be last, and Collier disagrees.
Yeah, I just think you do whatever you want. Like, there is no rules, and that is the easiest interpretation of, like, yeah, sometimes it's good to create for people, sometimes it's good to create for yourself. Like, I struggle with this, like, you should do this, you should do that. This is one of the difficulties of this project. I say, like, ideas rather than advice. Like, and not, it's actually nice to have, like, a disagreement of a point of view. These are not, like, rules or something, you know? And sometimes with when you're putting things out there, it can come across as an authoritative point of view, and it's not. It's just ideas, and I know how that lands on the other side. Like this man writing in caps lock on a black and it's not me telling you to do something. It's, hey, what about this? That's more the tone. But yeah, what do you think?
It's so funny that you bring this up because Elijah showed it to me before the talk.
Yeah.
Like, we were talking and he showed me the video. And so I know what you're talking about. That's cultural learnings. That's amazing. But to just add to what was being discussed, and I've been ruminating on this a lot because I think there's this idea called formalism in art, which is the idea that critiquing a certain piece of work, whether that's music or art, visual art or anything, there's certain formalities that are involved in it, whether that's like a certain genre and how that's supposed to be, or in classical music, how a certain artist there was a lot of focus, formalism has a lot of focus on like how the artist had executed their work using a specific structure or a specific way of doing things, and whether that's closer to what the thing should be. But there's also the opposite side of that, which is, I guess, like contextualizing, and how like maybe someone is not making techno in the way that people like how it should be, but it depends on the context. And going back to the idea of like where should the artist place the audience, there's in writing, I think there's this idea that you can just, and actually with anything, it's like you create something and just like let the audience like take it all in, and just like it's just make it for your own sake, make it for art's sake, and it's up to the audience to just like digest that. But there's also this idea that has appealed to me recently, which is the artist is actually part of the audience, and day to day is actually interacting with the audience, with the public, and taking inspiration from it. And how do we, and then this is what I've been thinking about, like how do we create an ecosystem in which we are deriving pleasure and profit from the artistry that everyone consumes? So that's something that I've been thinking about, and I don't have the answer, but it's a nice idea to think.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just watched that clip just before. Does anyone else want to do a question? Why is everyone so quiet? Are people shy? What's happening? All right, I'm gonna just pick someone. Maybe should be someone at the back because you are hiding now. One person, come forward. All right, you go to them. Huh? Yeah. Don't worry, we've got this.
Can something that doesn't fall under the standard definition of art be considered art for you?
Definitely. So, like, all right, this is kind of like following from this question. The scene that I started on was new, so there weren't any rules. So when people came later and they started saying what should be and shouldn't be, these are rules that no one wrote down, no one's taken on. Like, they got to a point where I was like, why are we saying that there's rules when no one ever wrote them down? No one, as far as I know, no one wrote the rules of techno down on a piece of granite and stuck it in the floor of Detroit and said, this is what it's going to be forever. And when you come into a scene or a music culture or something like this, if there are these unwritten rules, ask who wrote them and why are we sticking to them? Does this make sense for here? Does this make sense for 2024? Does this make sense for me? Because if you subconsciously start taking on all of these reasons and then you realize, you're like, hold on, this is not even serving me anymore. I might enjoy the music, but actually I'm not getting out of it what could be, you know? So maybe like the Butterz and that idea wasn't based on what existed already in that scene. It was like, oh, we think grime could be like a club music instead of like a rap music. And that was the idea. Whereas other people in that scene didn't share that vision. And it's good to have many different kind of forms in that way. That makes sense? Thank you. Anyone else? All right, you know what? I know what's going to happen as well. As soon as we finish, everyone's going to come up to me like, yo, I got a question, man. And I'll do that afterwards as well. But I'll do some memes to finish, yeah, because we've only got a couple minutes, right? Right. Smiley face. My favorite philosopher, JME. You see two decks in a mixer, but I see the bigger picture. This is the DJ midwit situation. Does everyone know this meme? Like the person with the low IQ on the right says, this is me. If you love music, you should learn how to DJ. Then the middle people say, this is a corruption of the art DJ, none of the people should be allowed to DJ, all this rubbish. And then the people with the high IQ say, if you love music, you should learn how to DJ. Close that, make the thing. This is for you. This is my journey in music. So the beginning, confidence. 2020, the valley of despair. We're here now, close that, make the thing. And then hopefully it may all make sense in the end. Everyone know this meme? The fuck around and find out? Okay. Old school meme? Okay, we're warming up. All right, we're getting there. SpongeBob? Was this here? Yeah, SpongeBob was here. Okay. This is when my drawing was bad. I've got better at drawing, I promise. This is the creative process of probably everyone in here to some degree. You get a new idea, you make the thing, you finish it, but then don't actually show anyone. So there's that. This is the square, living inside my memes. This is us right now, me and Sai. This is fine. Elijah? Oh, I think that's the last square. Damn. Well, thank you so much, Sai. First of all, none of this would have happened without asking that question in the first place, and all of the organization by you, MCR team, the whole gallery team, everyone. So I'm mad grateful. Just thought I'd say that. Thank you very much for having me. I'm going to be around floating for today and tomorrow. We're going to do the after party.
Yes, after party in Boogie, Poblacion, Calayan Ave. Show starts at 10:30, doors open at 8. Be there. And Elijah's playing. There's going to be a special performance by Eli and Pete Shabu, who are also playing today.
Yes.
Loner, Jacques, Thomas Felix. It's going to be nice.
Yes. So, and if you see me, I'll have some stickers and stuff. So I was going to give them to the people that ask questions, but I need 2 questions.
Yeah.
But it's love.
Last chance for questions. Anyone? One. There you go. Oh my God. Yes.
All right. Pass my bag, please.
People are getting warmed up.
I guess this is a question for both of you, but particularly because of Butterz. When you guys started it, did you make it with the intention of affecting culture or as a commentary to the culture? But also for the Philippines when you started MCR?
Yeah, it's a good question. I feel like it was both, but also I wasn't thinking about that at the time. I was just doing stuff. And this is what I don't want to do. I don't want to like bullshit like I had loads of ideas when I was young and I was high concept or anything. I was just doing stuff. And later on I've made sense of it or tried to make sense of what I was doing as a young person, just like trying out all these different ideas. I thought, okay, I can add something to the scene that I thought was interesting and I was excited about, but I don't want to like over intellectualize what I was doing when I was like 21. Like I did a lot of stupid things as well, you know? And I don't want to like skip. Like I needed to do both to get to Butterz, you know. So yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. What do you think?
Cultural learnings will be very different from MCR because with MCR I joined later. I was a broadcaster first and then joined the volunteer team. And I think I basically, I really liked the vision, so I wanted to be part of it. And I saw how progressive it was culturally, just like the culture of being able to put up a radio station and help people like self-publish their work. So it's very difficult to say from an MCR perspective, but with cultural learnings, like, and as well, like on MCR, like when I was a broadcaster, I was just doing these things for fun. Like I was just bored most of the time. And then it just kept me from being bored. And what was really nice about it is just like connecting with people. And I think that's why like I believe an artist is part of the audience, because it's so fulfilling to be able to make connections with people and to just have conversations. Like never mind the thing I made, like I want to talk to you. And that's the thing that like keeps me going personally, is just like how the thing leads to something that I never would have thought or happened, or what constantly surprises me. So yeah, I think boredom is a great tool sometimes.
Boredom is the creative director.
Yeah.
All right, big up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you have a question? All right, go quickly. Huh?
Yeah, I've been dying to ask.
Okay.
You have one square about like, it goes something like, if everyone is doing the same thing, it's not an ecosystem.
Yeah.
In 2024, what do you think is lacking within the creative and musical ecosystem?
Ooh, that's a good question. Okay, like I was thinking of that when I originally wrote it. It was in the context of DJing. So maybe in London, like the equivalent is like you're a DJ, you get like a release on a cool label, you get a boiler room, you get NTS show, you get a manager, you get an agent. This is like the 5 steps, then profit. You know, this is like nonsense. This does not work, and we can broaden what all of these things are. My frustration with electronic music culture is electronic music is everywhere, yet what we reflect the most is just the club. What we reflect the most is just the CDJ. I'm like, yo, like we can broaden this thing out, make the music live in more spaces. Who are the people behind it? Before, people would fight and say, it doesn't matter, like politics doesn't matter, let's keep the politics out of music. I'm like, why don't we just hear out what people got to say? You know? Like 10 years ago when I was starting, you rarely hear people's voices. And I think the scene and the infrastructure I've been part of has become more interesting for hearing people's perspectives, not less interesting. As all the problems that come with it are good, like long term. So we all understand each other, all kind of like get where all of these things are coming from. So ecosystem and the job titles and all this kind of stuff just stretching, I view as like super important. Like even me, my role, like artist manager, like what does this even mean? I think people have like an assumption of what that kind of person does. But then when I think of the things I do with the artists I work with, it's not what music management PhD would look like, or MA or degree would look like. It's completely different in real life. So yeah, I don't know. An ecosystem takes everyone doing something different and something interesting and dialing up the unique parts of themselves and what they do to make it interesting, you know?
I feel like there's, to answer your question, I feel like, top of my head, I feel like what's sort of missing in the creative ecosystem in 2024 is like mundane conversations, i.e. like just people being very transparent about their lives outside of their creative work. And I feel like a lot of intersectionality and holistic ideas can come from there, because yes, like we're doing the culture work, we're doing the thing, it's so grinding sometimes, but how people live on a day-to-day outside of that culture work, I feel like those conversations are so understated. And actually I feel like a lot of solutions can come up through those conversations about how people live, how people spend their lives and support their loved ones, and what people need on a day-to-day. I feel like being able to incorporate those stories in the creative practice and in the cultural work that we do, I feel like is understated. And again, like a lot of intersectionality, I believe, can stem from those types of conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But thank you. Again, but we done, yeah?
We have a few minutes, so
Huh?
I mean, how much time do we have? We have 10 minutes.
Oh, we have 10 minutes. Oh,
Yeah.
sweet. We'll go back one back. Okay, maybe this one is kind of the one, right? It's like, well, we've platformed ourselves here in this situation, but I guess one of the things I want to leave is this continuing, or this kind of way of gathering, continuing. So like creating your own lecture about who you are, what you do, the art you create, and giving context to the work you do or your perspective is like a good exercise. So sometimes with artists, we're just like thinking of, oh, we're just going to release the EP, or we're going to do the DJ set. But if you thought about talking about your work for 20 minutes here, or 10 minutes, or whatever it's going to be, and just explain who you are, this is like a good creative exercise that we can go through. And part of my art therapy, or my like development here, has been having to explain my ideas and have them interrogated in public. So yeah, create your own lecture, continue this thing in whatever way makes sense when I'm gone. And I feel like that's like a good tradition to continue, artists speaking and sharing their work in this way. Is that cool?
Yeah. And I guess like to add to that, and I told you this a while ago, and I was really inspired by a moment in a film called 24-Hour Party People. And I think there's a lot of, I guess, insecurity or feeling of something that is daunting when we try to put ourselves in public and be vulnerable, and how it will reach different people. And there was a part in the film when they were like, oh, like, I'm worried that, like, it's basically about rave culture, and then the people in the film were, like, really worried that, like, no one was gonna attend the party, and then this one guy who was really optimistic, he was like, yeah, but, like, Treaty of Versailles, there were, like, 5 people there. That was historical, that was, like, legendary. Like, imagine a party where you're just, like, 5 people and a DJ, and you can make the same impact. Like, doesn't matter about, like, what the numbers are. Like, if you're just doing it, and then that's not going to be the last either. I think there's a lot of like hope in like being able to have that mindset.
Exactly. That is deep feedback in a nutshell, right? Like creating things with like 2 or 3 people or 5 people and getting the thing going and reflecting each other and seeing each other in that moment. So yeah, creating your own lecture is deep feedback too. So yeah. Anyone else want to add anything? Especially you people at the back. I'm picking on the people at the back. I don't know why. Come forward.
Oh my God.
Yeah, you.
Yeah.
Come forward, ask a question. Big up.
Yeah, hi.
Hey.
I have a question. So, as a DJ, how did grime impact your life? And what can we learn from it?
Yes. That's a good question. I don't think I've ever been asked this before, but when I was 16, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do in life. And then I saw like all these other people that looked like me creating things just on their home computers, making things happen and broadcasting on the local radio stations. And it was like very inspiring. I didn't think I'd be involved in that music or anything, but I saw people like just making their own labels and their own brand and shit. I was like, wow, these young boys are killing it. Like there's something here, and there's something that is sparking me to create too. Like I didn't think it would be music. I just thought maybe it'd be a business or something else. But it definitely like inspired the confidence to just try. And whether I got involved in grime or not, just that spark of seeing people that look like me do something was like the difference maker. And then as I got involved in the scene, it changed the trajectory of my life. Like I went to university, I could have just got a normal job, but the timing of, did you call it here, like the credit crunch? Like, so in 2008, there was like a housing crash. It was like a worldwide recession. And that was the year I graduated. So when I finished, I couldn't get a job. And in that time, I was like, okay, let me just commit to music because I didn't have an alternative in terms of work. I was going for interviews, couldn't get a job. And I was like, okay, let me just try music and just kind of ground out a kind of career in it, just through a period of real difficulty, and then stayed in basically since then, which I guess the same thing has happened in 2020, right? It's that a complete shutdown forces creativity in a different way. A complete kind of meltdown of infrastructure caused another sort of opportunity. So yeah, grime changed my life. This is why I can be critical of the scene and a lot of things that happened that I think are stupid, but it was a very unique opportunity that I'm grateful for forever. And the people that there's a lot of people in it that I've got a lot of respect for, and they're still impactful in my life today. So without grime, literally without grime, I wouldn't even be talking to you here. So I owe my whole career to that music and that scene. I'm not ashamed to say that, you know? Some people they move on after something. Jeez. Yeah, they move on after a few years, but I've always tried to put back into that thing because it was such a big part of my life, you know? Yeah. It's a long answer to a short question, but thank you. Cheers. Whoa. And I don't think you realize how mad this. All right, just for context, yeah, this is not grime is not commercial US rap where there's millions of dollars spent on marketing everywhere and they have shitloads of money and people are rich. These are DIY people putting out music with not a lot of budget, wearing their own clothes, just raw, very, 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 very DIY. And that's how it started and developed. Not a lot of kind of investments from labels and all the stuff. All the labels didn't want to sell the music or promote it. And we've still found a way. And that remains an inspiration, you know? And when I see people with the next scenes of drill or Amapiano or whatever it's going to be, I'm like, yeah, do your thing. I see the same spirit in the next generations that have come afterwards. Yeah.
Sweet. We're going to wrap it up because there's a lot that we're going to be moving forward to this evening.
Yeah. We got music, man. We got
music, we got coffee, cocktails, wine, more music. Thank you, Elijah.
Thank you. Thank you. Big up, big up, big up. Big up.
Thank you.
Manila Community Radio.